A lazy drizzle had rinsed the roofs of Maracek, leaving puddles that stitched silver threads along the cobblestones. At the entrance of a narrow apartment block sat Mochi, a small gray cat with a patched ear and the determination of a weary shopkeeper. Beside him, a hand-pulled cart rattled with half-filled bags of bottles, cleaning rags, and a dented tin labeled Mochi's cleaning service. His whiskers twitched as he studied the trash littered around the steps. "It's more-tastic," he muttered, echoing his favorite saying with a sigh that puffed like steam. More-tastic piles of people's mess. Inside, his owner Darin Puh still slept, wrapped in the hazy smell of beer and age. The old man had once been strong, now he barely remembered to eat. Mochi brewed himself a bowl of green tea, his tiny paws steady as he poured the steaming water. He took a sip and gazed at the photo on the kitchen counter, Darin grinning, a younger, sleeker Mochi perched on his shoulder. The edges of the photograph had curled with time. Darin had promised him the home someday. "I'll keep the place shining for you until then," Mochi thought. By dawn, the cat was already at work. He gathered empty bottles with swift motions, the sound of glass clinking like wind chimes. He stowed them on the cart, his modest side hustle for extra coin, then padded off toward the neighboring flats. A small plastic badge swung from his neck, half proudly, half absurdly declaring, "Self-employed cleaner." A man in his 30s opened the next door. "You're the cat?" he asked, half awake. "That's me," Mochi said, pushing his cart in. "Let's get this cleaned up." The smell hit him first, burnt oil, sweat, and something sour. Bottles and clothes were strewn across every surface. In the back room, a shape lay motionless on the floor. Mochi froze, fur bristling. He padded closer, pressed a paw softly to the man's neck. No movement. His breath caught like a hairball. Then a tremor, a pulse, faint but there. Mochi darted to the sink, soaked a towel, and rubbed it briskly over the man's face. "Come on, wake up, sir." The man stirred, coughed, and blinked at the cat. "You talk?" he rasped. "Yes, and apparently I rescue drunks too," Mochi grumbled. "Your brother hired me to clean, not to perform miracles." The man, Alia, laughed weakly and sat up. "Then I owe you both 10 pounds and an apology." They worked together through the morning, sorting bottles and folding damp clothes. By the time the rooms gleamed again, the light outside had gone soft and golden. Alia offered dinner, setting down 2 porcelain bowls of Salisbury stew. Steam curled upward, the scent of meat and peas filled the room. Mochi ate silently, the warmth easing something inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "I need to check on Darin." But when they reached the apartment, blue lights washed over the doorway. An officer stood waiting. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "The old man passed at noon." Mochi's bull-bright eyes dimmed. Alia bent, scooping the trembling cat into his arms. "It's all right," he whispered. "You've still got someone to come home to." Outside, the rain began again, soft and endless, washing Maracek clean. The first weeks in Alia's apartment were chaos in a shoebox. Every surface was occupied by something mildly concerning, half-empty mugs, newspapers that predated the century, and one cactus named Kevin that was clearly plotting murder. Mochi, now official housemaid and part-time life coach, took it upon himself to civilize the place. "It's more-tastic. It's truly more-tastic," he muttered, pawing a sock from the toaster. "Alia, are you trying to toast your wardrobe again?" Alia, bleary-eyed and wrapped in a blanket that looked suspiciously like a burrito wrapper, groaned from the couch. "Don't judge, Mochi. It's called efficiency." "I call it combustible fashion," he said, dragging the sock into the growing pile of laundry. He wore his yellow cleaning gloves like a knight wears gauntlets. When Mochi cleaned, he meant it. By week 3, the apartment looked less like an archaeological dig and more like a place humans might willingly inhabit. Alia smiled for the first time in what felt like years. It wasn't big, just a small flicker, but Mochi caught it. Cats notice these things. "See," he said, curling on the back of the couch. "Clean floor, clear mind." A proverb from the holy book of Broom. Alia laughed, the sound brittle but real. You're something else, Mochi. I'm everything else, he said smugly. Outside, Maracek's evening lights glowed golden, windows trembling with music and life. Inside, the quiet hummed like a warm kettle, broken only by Mochi's occasional lectures on proper recycling technique. It took another month before Alia started leaving the house again, first for coffee, then for the small bookstore down the street. Mochi approved. Exposure to sunlight, excellent. Talking to strangers, risky but manageable. Spending money on overpriced lattes, mildly concerning. He'd created a tracking chart on the fridge. Categories included mood swings, amount of crumbs, and likelihood Alia will buy another plant. Things were looking up. Until that night. It was Friday, which in Alia's calendar apparently meant drink and remember. On the table sat 2 glasses, one tiny, porcelain, and cat-sized, filled with green tea, the other tall, human-sized, and filled with something that smelled like the devil's perfume. Alia slumped in her chair, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. Mochi sat opposite, tail curling rhythmically like a metronome. Tell me, he said, why do humans insist on beverages that make them sad and dizzy? Because it quiets the noise, Alia said, staring at the glass. Sometimes the quiet is the only thing that makes sense. Mochi studied her. Her shoulders trembled slightly, as though words were piling up inside her and had nowhere to go. You know. She began, her voice thick. You remind me of him. Darin? Mochi's ears twitched. The name hung heavy, smoky with memory. Alia nodded. Yeah. Darin Puh. My father. The cat froze, whisker stiff. The clock ticked 3 times before he spoke. You're Darin's son? Surprise, Alia said, raising her glass in a mock toast. The old man who fed you mushroom stew every Sunday, yeah. He was my dad. She laughed, sharp and soft at once. Funny world, huh? Mochi blinked. I spent 8 years arranging his socks by shade and scent, and he never once mentioned a son. He didn't talk about me, Alia admitted, voice cracking. We fought. I left. By the time I thought about coming back, it was too late. Silence. Even the hum of the refrigerator quieted, sensing the grief in the air. Mochi patted over the table, his fur catching the glow from the single lamp. He sat by her elbow. He loved you, you know. He used to stare at your photo when he pretended to watch the news. Said his boy took after him, stubborn as a mule, sensitive as a sponge. Alia's eyes shimmered. He said that? Mochi flicked his tail. He never shut up about it. She smiled, watery. You're lying. Professionally, said Mochi. But not tonight. The drink loosened the sadness into something almost bearable. Soon Alia was laughing as Mochi recounted stories of Darin's eccentric habits, painting the kitchen at midnight, singing to the refrigerator, and once insisting that sardines were spiritual protein. Sounds like him, Alia said, head resting on her folded arms. He was ridiculous. He was magnificent, Mochi corrected. They both laughed. At some point, Alia poured a splash of the drink into Mochi's bowl. For you, she said. Mochi sniffed it suspiciously. This is ethanol with trust issues. Live a little, tiny man. He licked once. His face puckered. This tastes like bad decisions and regret. 10 out of 10 for authenticity. Alia laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Later, when the laughter quieted, Mochi jumped onto her lap. She was warm and a little wobbly, but her heartbeat was steady beneath his paws. You know, she murmured, you saved me. That day. On the floor. I was ready to, she stopped. You showed up. Mochi tilted his head. I was just cleaning. Yeah, she said softly. But you cleaned more than the room. He blinked, processing that. That's disgustingly poetic. Alia smiled. You love it. Only slightly, he admitted. Months passed, and their lives settled into an odd but functional rhythm. Alia worked mornings at the bookstore, Mochi picked up cleaning gigs and occasionally did motivational consulting with local cats, most of whom ignored him. Every evening they'd share tea, green for him, chamomile for her, and swap stories. Mochi still complained about everything. The dust. The neighbors' music. The existential state of laundry. But now, Alia would roll her eyes and say, "It's mortastic, right?" He'd grin. Always mortastic. One spring afternoon, Alia found him napping on the windowsill, sun glinting off his sleek fur. She slipped a tiny blue ribbon around his neck. "What's this?" he asked, blinking awake. "Official badge of family membership." Mochi purred. "Do I get health insurance?" "Absolutely not." He rubbed against her cheek anyway. "Fine. I'll settle for tuna privileges." Done. That night, as they sat on the balcony watching the town lights shimmer like scattered marbles, Alia raised her glass. "To Darin," she said. Mochi raised his tea bowl. "And to second chances." They clinked. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a tune that sounded suspiciously like Hope wearing mismatched shoes. Mochi leaned back, tail swishing lazily. "You know, Alia, life here isn't half bad." She glanced at him. "You think so?" "Yeah. It's messy. Loud. Full of questionable odors. But it's ours." Alia chuckled. "That's probably the nicest thing you've ever said." "Don't get used to it," Mochi said, curling into a ball. "Tomorrow I'll complain about your sock toaster again." And as the moon climbed higher over Maracek, the cat and his human, each once broken in their own way, sat together in the quiet, stitched by laughter, tea, and the stubborn promise of one more day.